What's up, everybody? It's interesting now. We're back with another video, and let me tell you, this one's a little intense. Today, we're talking about the top 10 most dangerous countries in the world as of right now in 2025. We're not just talking about places with a few pickpockets, we're talking about countries where there's conflict, violence and danger around every corner. We're talking about places where just surviving another day can be a challenge. It's important to remember that these are real places with real people, and they're going through some really tough times. So as we go through this list, let's try to have some empathy and understanding for what these people are going through.
First up on our list we have Afghanistan. This country has been ravaged by war for decades. Since the Taliban took over, chaos and uncertainty reign. Constant threats from groups like ISIS-K make daily life perilous. Imagine living in a place where you're constantly looking over your shoulder. The lack of security and widespread poverty make it extremely dangerous. It's heartbreaking to see a country with so much potential trapped in violence. Aid workers, journalists and local peacekeepers risk their lives to help. It's a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. Let's hope that one day Afghanistan can find peace and stability. Syria has been torn apart by civil war for over a decade. What started as peaceful protests in 2011 escalated into a brutal conflict. Millions of Syrians have been displaced by the conflict. The country remains divided among various factions. Imagine being forced to flee with nothing but the clothes on your back. We must keep raising awareness and supporting aid organizations. Coming in at number 3, we have South Sudan, a country that's been plagued by conflict since it gained independence in 2011. Imagine a country where tribal rivalries and political instability have led to a brutal civil war. That's the reality in South Sudan, where millions of people have been displaced from their homes and are facing starvation. The fighting has created a humanitarian catastrophe with widespread hunger, disease and violence. Can you imagine being a parent who can't even feed their children? That's the heartbreaking reality for many families in South Sudan. The lack of infrastructure and basic services makes it even harder to provide aid to those who desperately need it. It's a dangerous and volatile situation, and there's no easy solution in sight. But we have to keep trying. We have to keep pushing for peace and supporting the organizations that are working tirelessly to help the people of South Sudan. Chapter 4. Yemen, a forgotten war. Number 4 on our list is Yemen, a country that's often called the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Yemen has been ravaged by a civil war that's been raging since 2014, and it's only gotten worse in recent years. Imagine a country where bombs rain down from the sky, destroying homes, hospitals and schools. That's the reality in Yemen, where millions of people are living on the brink of famine. The conflict has created a massive humanitarian crisis with widespread hunger, disease and displacement. Children are dying from preventable diseases and families are being torn apart by violence. It's hard to fathom the level of suffering that's happening in Yemen. The international community needs to step up and do more to help. We need to provide humanitarian aid, push for a ceasefire, and hold those responsible for war crimes accountable. The people of Yemen deserve better. Chapter 5. Iraq, still healing from the scars of war. At number 5, we have Iraq, a country that's been ravaged by war and instability for decades. Even though the defeat of ISIS was a major victory, Iraq still faces significant challenges. The country is still struggling to rebuild after years of conflict, and the threat of terrorism is still very real. Imagine living in a country where car bombs and suicide attacks are a constant threat. That's the reality for many Iraqis who are trying to rebuild their lives. The presence of militias and sectarian violence also contributes to the instability, making it a dangerous place for locals and foreigners alike. Corruption is rampant, and the government is struggling to provide basic services to its citizens. It's a complex situation with no easy solutions, But despite the challenges, the Iraqi people are resilient and they're determined to create a better future for themselves and their children. Chapter 6: Somalia, struggling for stability. Somalia has faced lawlessness and violence for decades. Armed militias and terrorist groups roam free. Piracy, kidnappings and bombings are common. Al-Shabaab controls large parts, carrying out attacks. Civilians live in constant fear. The Somali people are incredibly resilient. Drought and famine worsen the crisis. Lack of basic services hinders rebuilding. With support, there's hope for a brighter future. At number 7, we have the Central African Republic, a country that's been trapped in a cycle of violence and instability for years. Imagine a country where armed groups control vast territories, terrorizing civilians and committing atrocities. That's the heartbreaking reality in the Central African Republic, where religious and ethnic tensions fuel the conflict. The country is rich in resources, but corruption and violence prevent it from reaching its full potential. Imagine being a child who's grown up knowing nothing but war and displacement. That's the reality for many children in the Central African Republic who've been robbed of their childhoods. The lack of basic services, like healthcare and education, makes it even harder to break the cycle of poverty and violence. It's a complex and challenging situation, but we can't afford to turn our backs on the people of the Central African Republic. Coming in at number 8 is Libya, a country that's been in a state of chaos since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Imagine a country divided between rival governments, each backed by different militias and foreign powers. That's the reality in Libya, where violence and instability have become the norm. The country is a major transit point for migrants trying to reach Europe, and human trafficking is a serious problem. Imagine being desperate enough to risk your life crossing the Mediterranean Sea in a flimsy boat, only to be met with hostility and danger on the other side. The lack of a strong central government has created a power vacuum, and armed groups are vying for control. It's a dangerous and unpredictable situation, and it's unclear when or if stability will return to Libya. The international community needs to work together to support a peaceful resolution to the conflict and help Libya rebuild. So at number 9 we have the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country with immense natural resources but plagued by conflict and instability. Imagine a country the size of Western Europe, rich in minerals like diamonds and gold, but where millions live in poverty. That's the DRC, where armed groups terrorize civilians and fight for control of these valuable resources. The eastern part of the country is particularly volatile, with dozens of armed groups operating in the region. Imagine living in constant fear of being attacked, kidnapped, or forced to flee your home. Sexual violence is rampant, and children are often forced to become soldiers. The humanitarian crisis in the DRC is one of the worst in the world, with millions in need of food, water, and medical care. It's a complex and challenging situation that requires a concerted international effort to address. Finally, at number 10, we have Venezuela, a country that was once one of the wealthiest in South America, but has been plunged into a devastating crisis. Imagine a country with the world's largest oil reserves, yet where people are starving and struggling to survive. That's the reality in Venezuela, where hyperinflation has made the currency practically worthless. Food and medicine are scarce, and basic services like electricity and water are unreliable. Imagine having to flee your home country just to find food and medicine for your family. That's the heartbreaking reality for millions of Venezuelans who've been forced to migrate to neighboring countries. The political and economic crisis in Venezuela has created a humanitarian catastrophe, and it's unclear when or if things will improve. The international community needs to provide aid and support to the Venezuelan people while also pushing for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. Thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more content. Stay safe and see you in the next video.